spent a lifetime learning how to split wood and sharpen a chainsaw, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to improve my methods. How you doing today, guys? About maybe 3 weeks ago, I put a video out where I was cutting a log, and the video title was "Why I Sharpen My Chainsaw Every Tank of Gas." And I want to thank all you guys who said, I sharpen every tank of gas, or, just be yourself. I do appreciate that. And again, I certainly understand there's a lot of guys that don't sharpen every tank of gas. Well, I've been working my way through the pile, and excuse me, got a little itch there. I've been working my way through the pile, and wow, we're overexposed big time there. The sun peeking in and out. I've been working my way through the pile, and I got to that log. So I figured today I want to take you guys along and kind of show you my methods for cutting, cutting the bigger logs. I've been using my Wetterlings maul. I can't say exclusively, but quite a bit since I got it at least 5 years ago. And this is still the original handle. I'm almost due for a new one, but. I do have a Timberwolf log splitter, and it's a great splitter. But one thing, I'm gonna hold on to the maul because I just feel more comfortable with the maul in my hands. The hydraulic splitter, don't get me wrong, you can do a lot more work a lot faster. It just destroys the wood. It twists it and gnarls it. It creates a lot more debris when you're cutting. There's no art to it. You just stick the log on the splitter. And I think it's dangerous. The hydraulic one, I always feel like a log is about to kind of like peel off and come back at me and catch my fingers. And I don't think it's ever happened yet. I'm very careful about what I do, but that's a lot of force on that log. And again, don't get me wrong. I know if you need a lot of firewood, you would use a hydraulic splitter. But, my premise for this video, and what I should have said sooner, was if you're burning 6 to 8 cords of wood a year, number one, and number two is if you enjoy being outdoors and splitting wood, you don't need a log splitter. You need a good chainsaw. You need a good splitting maul. Which one that is up to you. I think the Wetterlings is a beautiful maul. We'll talk more about that later, perhaps. You need to know how to sharpen your chainsaw by hand, not with a machine. I'm sure you could use a machine, but I think, splitting 6 to 8 cords by hand, for me, splitting 6 to 8 cords by hand would be a cakewalk for my stove. I just split year round. I just keep splitting, because I enjoy it. And if I have some extra wood, I'll sell it. But I'm not splitting as much as I can. If I wanted to sell firewood, to make a living, I'd use some kind of tool. I'm just splitting enough wood that I can get out and do what I love. This is some guys go fishing, some guys go biking, some guys go to the gym, some guys go to, sporting events, baseball games, football games, and tailgate. For me, this is my piece, is being in the backyard. And the other thing I wanted to say was, the thing about the hydraulic splitters, there's a song by Miranda Lambert. It's called Automatic. And I just, when I was splitting this morning, I was splitting this morning, and that song kind of went through my head. I think we're so focused on the right chainsaw, the right splitting maul. It's a great maul, don't get me wrong. But it's more about the skill, and all these other things will make a difference. But I think the technique and having the right stuff is what's going to make the biggest difference, and sometimes I think about going out and getting like a home light. I've been to Sears several times, and I've been like, for $150 or $170, it might be fun to buy a Sears chainsaw or a home light chainsaw, an entry-level chainsaw, and show you guys that, no, it's not going to cut as fast as a steel, but if you've got a good edge on an entry-level saw, if you treat it with care, if you treat any tool with care, it's going to work. It's going to work well, and when I started, you know, log splitting more seriously, maybe it was 10 years ago or so, I had the chainsaws, but I didn't have the Wetterlings. This is my grandfather's axe. It's a plumb axe. My grandfather, on my mom's side, I've mentioned in other videos, he was a mechanic at a car dealer. It was an automobile dealership. And I think it's funny because my mom tells me the story that he was a mechanic, and you know, that's all he did all his life. And at one point they gave him the opportunity to move up and to become like the shop, I guess the guy that people talk to. He didn't turn the wrenches, he basically shop foreman, whatever in a garage, the guy the customers talk to, and whatever. And he did that for a while, and after he did that for a while, he just he told them that he just wanted to turn wrenches. He just, you know, the managing people just wasn't really for him, but I guess both customers and other mechanics. He just loved to work on things. And so that's where I got that little hatchet from. And this wedge, which is missing a piece, when I was about 10 years old, I'm not really sure why, my father got a load of unsplit wood. And one of the things we used to do is it was my job to take this very wedge. Let's think about this if I was 10, so like 37 years ago, and it wasn't missing that piece then, and I had like a 2-pound hammer, and I was supposed to drive this wedge in. We did a sledge and wedge to break up the big pieces, and then he would just take an axe and cut the rest. And my mom and my dad both worked in offices, and my dad wasn't really an outdoorsy type guy. My mom enjoys being outdoors and working in the garden, and that's where I get my gardening from. But, you know, it was that's what got me into splitting wood for whatever reason. You know, I think he only got like 2 loads of wood that we did together. But I just loved it back then. There was something about it. I want you to do me a favor, and if you're trying to watch this video, you know, when you've only got a limited amount of time, just stop watching right now. You know, save this video for some time, maybe on a weekend, you know, a Sunday afternoon, you're just kind of killing time, or, you know, maybe you just have a day where you're just kind of like, you just want to be distracted for a while. Save this video for a time like that. Don't try to watch this video, you know, in the morning when you're on your way to work and you want to just kind of, you know, zip through something. This isn't going to be that type of video. This one's going to end up being a pretty long one. And I think it'd be better if you watch from start to finish, but that's up to you. But I'm going to do my best to share some of my knowledge if you want it. And the first thing I want to share is gloves. I got a pair. These are called deerskin gloves. Deerskin gloves, as opposed to cowhide gloves, cowhide deerskin, they're much softer. They're much more flexible. They're just more comfortable. Deerskin gloves cost 2 to 3 times what a cowhide glove costs, probably 3. This pair would have been $20 to $25. I've seen them sold at the steel dealer. You can get them, or you can get them at the depot. But it's just you don't want to use deerskin gloves for stuff like if all you're going to be doing is throwing wood, use these gloves. But if you're going to be grabbing your splitting maul, if you're going to be using your saw, use the deerskin. And then in the cold weather, what I've got is I've actually got some glove liners underneath, because things get cold quick, you know, and when you're using the saw, the vibrations, I was out using my saw, and if it's below 20 degrees, I don't know how guys do it. The vibrations somehow make your hands more sensitive to the cold, and you're just squeezing this cold handlebar on the saw, and you're like within a half a tank, your fingertips start to get numb. So, you know, be careful in cold weather with the chainsaws. But I think deerskin gloves, like I'll never, I won't say never, but I will try to have deerskin gloves whenever I'm splitting wood now or using the saw, because they're so comfortable as opposed to these cowhide gloves. This is the log we're going to be splitting, and if you guys remember from that video, you see all the dirt on this log. See the dirt right by the ground there? So one of the people that commented in that video said, why not get like a bark scraper to scrape off some of that dirt? And I thought that was a really awesome idea, but I didn't want to go out and buy a bark scraper because I'm only going to use it every once in a while. But what I did find in my tool shed was I found this tool right here, which is, it's designed for burying cable. You know, you put it in the ground and move it and you can bury cable, but I think that's a great tool to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scrape off all this dirt on the bottom before I start cutting this log. What I'm going to do for my technique to cut this log is I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut the top of the log just before the dirt, or as low as I can. I'm going to make all my cuts, and then I'm going to cut in the middle of this log, and I'm going to use a wedge, and this is kind of cool. You know, I used this wedge last year and I hit it with a saw and I just destroyed it. But I was splitting wood this year, and I just found this is red oak, and it's like just the right size. I think it's so cool to have like an old school wedge. I have a cant hook and I cannot. This log is too heavy and probably frozen to the ground, so I can't spin it all the way. So once I go to make the cut through the middle, I'm probably going to end up hitting some dirt and end up sharpening after that. So what I'll do is I'll make all my cuts first, and then I'll cut through the middle, knowing I'm probably going to hit dirt, touch up the saw, then come back, make the rest of the cuts once I roll the log and clean it off. The way I usually measure the length of wood, if I'm in doubt, is I have a 20-inch bar. So I will I'll put the saw on the log, and I'll usually use the end of my dogs, and I'll just go like a couple inches back from the tip of the bar, and that'll usually give me like a 16 to 18 inch piece of wood. But what I do when I'm getting to larger sizes of wood like this, and what I try to do, and I don't often succeed, is I'll do that, but I'll make my logs significantly shorter, you know, because these big ones, they take more effort to split. So you make your logs shorter, your cuts shorter, and it's going to be easier to split. And yeah, you know, you're going to have shorter wood, but you're not going to kill yourself when you're splitting the wood. And what I do, you know, I did this another day, is I already went through, before I start cutting, I'll mark with the saw where my cuts are. And, you know, that way you kind of get in the heat of the moment. So I try to have a plan of attack before I start cutting, and then go back and make my cuts. Guys, this may be a video in sharpening, because this mud is just frozen solid. I got as much off as I could, but there's probably still enough there that I'm going to lose that chain quite often. If it was above freezing, I would probably just take my hatchet and just slide it along there to knock that dirt off. And then some people will just use a wire brush. Again, if it's not frozen, it's okay. It comes off much better. You know, it may seem silly to be cleaning the dirt off a log, but it's a lot quicker, less time to do this than it is to sharpen a saw. So the most dangerous part on the chainsaw, well, the whole bar is the most dangerous part. But when you're cutting from halfway on the guide bar to the top of the guide bar, if you touch this tip, all that force of the chain, if you accidentally bump something, all that force of the chain is going to kick that, it's called kickback, it's going to kick that saw back at you. And I just want to caution you guys, because the time I have the most trouble with kickback is when I'm cutting on a pile of logs. So, you know, I'm going to be as careful as I can, but you got to be real careful when you're making your cuts like this, that you don't accidentally touch the tip of the chain into that other log and the saw come back at you. And if you're new to this, I recommend I recommend you go to any of the manufacturers. I know Husqvarna's got some really great videos. I'm sure Stihl does too. But watch some of the manufacturers' videos about kickback because you really want to understand it before you start messing with a chainsaw. How cold is it? Nice bottle of ice water. I've cut as far as I can into those logs, so now I'm going to go back to the middle and see if I can cut the rest of one in the middle. Now I know I'm probably going to hit my chain into the ground and have to resharpen. One of two things is going to happen here. I'll be able to cut the log all the way, or I'll take some wedges and stick it in the log and see if I can just drive it apart because the outer couple inches is rotted. The third thing that could happen is I get a saw with a bigger bar. I have an 046 with a 24-inch bar to get farther in. This is a pretty big log. I think it's cut, it's just frozen to the ground. And I don't want to just go animal on the thing and hurt myself. I think I'm going to go get a pry bar and see how that does. So that one went pretty smoothly, and I'm pretty happy with the results. And I just wanted to also show you that, you know, my 036 is using the 20-inch bar. We'll get a tape measure, we'll measure this log later maybe, but you don't need an 066 or an 046. I have them because I'm a connoisseur. A good chainsaw with a 20-inch bar will get you through, you know, I can't say exactly 40-inch log, but a 38-inch log if you cut it from both sides. You just got to be patient, you got to be careful. Another tool you really should have early in your career if you're going to be collecting firewood is this guy right here. This is called a cant hook. This is called a cant hook. If it's got a straight point on it, it's called a PV. And this is so valuable for getting in there and rolling logs. I mean, you just saw what I did there. If I was going to try to do that with just pushing the log, I might hurt myself. And I could probably have done it with the pry bar there, but it's just not the same. I'll figure out what size this one is, but this is a good starter size. You know, once you got this size, you can always, you know, get other ones. But for basic kit, you need this size, which I want to say a number, but I'm going to check the number and I'll put it on the video here before I say anything. So here's the results of our efforts, and I think things went pretty well. You know, I think if it wasn't for the fact that everything's frozen, this would have gone a lot smoother. But I'm pretty sure, I'm not actually pretty sure, I'm very sure, I'm just going to have to go ahead and sharpen my chain. Now that we got the log rolled, we can just take our tool and clean off all this dirt. So when I come back with a sharp chain, I'm cutting clean wood, which really is the secret to life. We'll just knock this off so I don't end up bringing big chunks of wood to my wood pile. Big chunks of mud. Before I forget, so I've got a steel, it's an 036, and this is a 20-inch bar. So this is how far I was getting in there with my 20-inch bar. And unfortunately, to finish the cut, I had to come all the way down. And, you know, there's some dirt. I don't know if I saw it in the video or not, but near the end, I hit some dirt, and that's when you know you just lost your chain. But that was really the only way to get through this. And when I started, I was trying to kind of get in here. And if you start on this side, you can cut a lot of that back end. So when you come over to this side, you know, you can just about catch it. There's a little nub on this log here, which maybe caused me some trouble. This is white oak, guys. This is about as good as it gets, and this should probably be a piece of furniture, not firewood. The diameter of this log is, we're going to call that about 25 inches. See how it is this way. Yeah, 24, 25. And you can kind of see it's been sitting here for so long. I mean, this piece came to me maybe 3 years ago, that it started to dry out and rot on the outside. But all this wood in the middle is beautiful stuff, and would have made a really nice set of furniture. The first thing I do before I sharpen a chain is I check my tension, and my tension is perfectly fine on this chain, so we're just going to go ahead and start sharpening. And I'm using, again, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, I bought this vise at a tag sale, and I mounted it on this log that is just the right height. This is it's probably 40, 42 inches off the ground. And I really like having the chainsaw at this height for sharpening. And if you're a hardcore hand filer, I think it's worth your time to mount a log with a vise outside to sharpen. I can certainly do it inside at my workbench, but it just saves me some steps from going inside to our workbench. My shed is right here, so I can just grab the fuel, the oil, and do what I need. I gotta go get a drink of water. I'll be right back. when you're making videos, sometimes you get so excited because you got just the shot you want, or the sun's just right, or it's just everything's flowing, you kind of forget to take a drink, and then you get very parched once in a while. I like to get my ice water. You hear that? So as I was saying, before I put the saw on the vise, I'll check the chain tension, and I really don't want to talk too much about chain tension because personally I think I put my chain on the saw tighter than the manual recommends, and that's the way I like it. I'm not sure if it's more dangerous or causes more wear, but your manual is going to tell you, or your dealer is going to tell you how tight to put the chain. We have the vise. I think we talked about that already. You want to be comfortable. You want to have good lighting. I've got my magnifying safety glasses. I did a video about these. These are either 1.5 or 2 times magnification. I think it's just a huge asset to see things much closer when you're filing. If you're new to filing, you know, I'm gonna file without the guide, but if you're new to filing, you know, there's all kinds of guides out there, and there's all kinds of guys willing to do reviews on guides, and they'll review like every guide out there. Maybe that's a good thing because you can see the differences, but for me, you know, simpler is better. So this one, this little guide is made by a lot of companies, but if you're new to filing, all you do is you just take your file, you slip it in this guide, you tighten it down, and then there's lines on the top, and that's going to tell you what angle to hold your file. Okay? And it's also going to keep the file at the right height so you have the right hook on the tooth. I've been using these pretty much all my life. It's only the last year or two that hand filing has come into focus. So it's taken me more than 20 years to master hand filing. So I think there's no shame in using a guide. I think a guide is always better than taking your chain to the dealer to be sharpened. And if you're learning how to sharpen a chain, boy, you're going to screw up big time. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'd file a chain and maybe I'd have too much hook and the chain would cut awesome for like 2 cuts and then dull right away. I wouldn't have enough hook. And I still make mistakes when I'm hand filing. But the cool thing is if you hand file with the guide or without, you'll learn what you're doing wrong and how to correct it. So let's go ahead and get started. And so we got our safety glasses, magnifying. I always mark one tooth. And it's funny, this marker has got to be probably 20 years old too, because when I first started reading about how to hand file, I went out and got an orange marker instead of black, because every time I used black I couldn't see it. So I just always have fond memories of this marker because I went to like Kmart or the drugstore just to get one marker. My glasses are fogging up. So then, you know, you just make sure your chain brake is off. You know, get used to how your body's positioned. I've noticed if I spread my legs just a touch, wherever you put your arm, wherever it's most comfortable to move your arm through that chain in a straight line, that's where you want to be. You don't want to be like at some awkward angle. So I literally, I've done it so many times now that I know just where I need to be. And then it's just a couple strokes. It's usually actually 3 strokes on this side, but I'm going to do 2 because the chain's almost done. And just move on, and we're going to touch this chain up. And you know, you can watch all the videos in the world about hand filing, again, with or without the jig. But until you start doing it and you do it right, you do it wrong, that's the way you learn. You got to make mistakes to learn. One piece of advice I will give you is if you're hand filing, keep an eye on the top of that tooth, And you want your file to be wherever the line of the sharp edge is, you want your file to be in contact with that line the whole time. If it's a jagged line on top, you got to smooth it out so it's one smooth line. And this is really all it takes, is just a light touch-up if you sharpen frequently. If you let your chain get beat to hell, it's going to take a lot more effort. And then what I've started doing is, you know, both inside and out, is once I file one side, I'll take the saw, flip it over, and stick it back in the vise. And then you got to find the orange mark. So the orange mark is coming around. There it is. So there's the orange mark. So I start with the tooth right after. And again, you know, you kind of get in the habit of keeping your body a certain way. And on this side, for whatever reason, I always either pull harder or I hold the file at a different angle, but I always remove metal faster on this side. So if I'm not near the end of the chain, I'll only do 2 strokes for a touch-up on this side, but 3 strokes for a touch-up on the other side. But we're near the end of the chain, so I'm just going to do 2 strokes for everything so I can make this chain last. And I can see the top of the cutters. It looks like this side of the chain has been doing more work, but the top of the cutters are almost rounded on this side, and just a couple strokes is enough to get them sharp again, to get that cutter sharp. I wonder how many of you guys are still watching this, or if I've just bored the bejesus out of you. So there you go. So we just touched up the chain. Now, it's probably only been 2 sharpenings since I checked my depth gauges. So we're just going to go with the depth gauges where they are. Plus, I want to keep the video moving. But that's how you sharpen up the chain. I don't know. Touch up the chain. You know, it's just practice makes better, and you're not going to be a first-time filer and just grab a raw file and file it. Maybe somebody is. I'm sure there's, you know, people that can. But the more you practice, and every time you screw up and you're like, geez, I just filed the whole chain and it's not cutting. What the heck? That's part of the process. But by the time you take this chain off and either put it on a grinder, or you take this chain off and drive to the dealer, drop it off for a week, then go back and pick it up, it's not worth the time in my book, and I want this saw to be razor sharp all the time, and that's what I do. All right, I'm going to touch up the fuel and the oil. We won't let you guys see that. I'm sure you know how to do that, and then we'll get back to work. I just want to show you guys, before we get back to work, there's 2 types of bar and chain oils that I know of, at least. You've got regular bar and chain oil, and then they make a thinner mix for winters. So it's probably about 25 degrees out now, 22 to 25. So let's just show you the difference. Here's regular bar and chain oil, and watch how it comes out. Which, you know, it's not that bad. But then we'll grab the winter mix and watch how it comes out. It's a much thinner oil. That way, when you're out working in really cold weather, the oil can still circulate. I'm not even sure you need the winter weight stuff at this time of year, but I hope you saw the difference with how quickly and how easily that moved. One thing I'd like to get is, you know, I wear the chaps, but I'd like to get a pair of chainsaw protective pants with the Kevlar, whatever's in there built in, the chainsaw protection. It is such a pain to have to take these chaps on and off every time I'm going to use the saw. And I really just need to bite the bullet, but the protective pants are significantly more money than chaps. But I think just the time savings alone, or just the lack of frustration alone, would make them worthwhile. If any of you guys know a good brand of chainsaw, what is it, chainsaw protective pants, you know, pants with the same protection the chaps have in case you hit yourself with the saw, let me know, because I really just need to do it. You know, it's not going to happen over the winter because funds are low, but maybe when my regular season starts, I can pick some up. All right, we're just going to buzz these two cuts here real quick and keep moving. Matching up the cuts on the bigger logs like that is not my strong point. For whatever reason, you know, if it's smaller stuff, you can make them match, but I always get sidetracked or lost when making those cuts. So I want to spend a minute here and talk about how awesome this Wetterlings Maul is. And a few of the awesome things about it are, is if you take a look at it, you see how, first off, it's made out of really heavy-duty steel, so it's not brittle and it holds its edge very nicely. But the other thing is, if you look at the head, it's got like a ridge in the middle here. Right here, there's a ridge. So that ridge pushes the wood apart, and this Wetterlings Maul, it's darn near impossible to get it stuck in wood. And if you've ever split with like an axe, I'm sure you've had trouble where if you get a wet piece of wood, it'll stick. But there's other things I like about this Wetterling Maul as well. And the other thing is that I think the head is maybe 3.5 or 4 pounds. It's a light head. I prefer my splitting mauls to have lighter heads. It's just more comfortable to use with a lighter head. Because it's got a lighter head, you'll notice a lot of times when I'm cutting, I'll use this just like an axe. I mean, I don't bring an axe with me. I just bring a Wetterlings Maul. And it's awesome because you can use it just like an axe to finish the cut. If I need to split a wood to carry, piece of wood to carry, I can do that. And then it does have the hardened head in the back here, so I can actually drive a wedge with this, whether it's a wedge into a tree, or if I'm driving a wedge into wood. I mean, this head is designed to strike other metal. Some of them aren't. And the final thing I'll do with it is I'll actually use this like a hookaroon. A hookaroon is a tool that's designed to kind of pull logs. It's basically a long piece of wood with a point sticking in it, and you can grab logs and pull them. Well, with this Wetterlings Maul, I'll just take it, and if I want to move my logs around, if they're split all the way, what I can do is just grab them just like a hookaroon and give them a roll. And the reason I was doing that is because what I want to do is kind of separate these logs a little bit, so when I start to split them, there's some room to work around them. But you know, again, there's you know, I have a hookaroon. I barely ever use it. I use it, you know, the week I got it. One time I was pulling a log with the hookaroon, and I was leaning back with my weight, which you shouldn't do, and the hookaroon came loose, and I went flying backwards and almost hit my head into another tree, so don't do that. But I tell you, this Wetterlings, you know, it's a splitting maul, but for what I'm doing, for my firewood cutting, I really like this Wetterlings. It's an all-purpose tool, so, you know, this is all I need most of the time. when I'm splitting wood. There's two different theories on how to split a log like this if you've got a really big log. The first theory is you look for the crack, see this crack in the middle, and you try to hit it along the crack. And when you're splitting it, you don't just hit it in one spot. You'll kind of work your way through, hit it a whole bunch of times, and if you're lucky, it'll split. If there's a knot or something in there, you know, you're not going to have luck with that. The other theory for splitting wood this size is you'll take pieces around the outside where it's easier. So you'll hit it several times around the outside, and then eventually a piece is going to break off. And I've done both ways, and it really, you know, it's funny. I'd like to say that one way is better than the other, and it depends on the log. But here's the most important thing I want you guys to remember, is when you're swinging at these logs, don't go Godzilla, you know, just have like a powerful swing, doesn't even have to be powerful, just have an accurate, somewhat powerful swing, and just use that swing again and again, and just get in the habit of swinging your maul, not with super duper power, just repeatedly where you want it to go, and eventually they're going to split. I see a lot of guys, a lot of young guys, they just go like with these animal swings, and it's like, boy, if you miss the log, you are going to just screw up your wrist or something. You know, the reason I got that log splitter years ago was because I was swinging too hard. I'd get so excited, you know, and want to just power through the logs, and I was hitting them so hard I was screwing up my wrists. So I really have to train myself now to just have my swing, my standard swing, and just, you know, let the maul do the work. And this could be the classic exercise in futility. Once you get things split across the top, I find you have better luck. If you do just start to hit the outside, it'll start to go. See? But to me, that seems like a ton of work. I mean, that was a lot of swings. So I guess the third method we're going to talk about is using the wedge. And another, you know, again, it's another thing I like about the Wetterlings is you can, you know, just use the same one you're using to split to drive that wedge. Now here's the problem. And don't get me wrong, I know a lot of guys have the patience or the strength to, you know, you'll get the wedge in there and then it'll pop out, and it's just such a pain in the butt. So the secret is take your saw, look for the cracks, and, you know, find like, you know, I take your chainsaw, look for the cracks, and find the strongest cracks, and just make some cuts just deep enough to kind of hold your wedge for you. And then you can come back with the wedge and split the log. And the reason that I was, you know, doing 3 logs at once here is because I only want to start my saw once. So once I start the saw, I'm going to do this to all 3 logs. I'm going to mark them where I want them to split, and then I can go back with the Wetterlings and the maul. And once they get split into quarters, they're usually small enough that you can use the maul to finish the cut. But it's just a lot of beating, and I want to put as little wear on my body as I can when I'm doing this. So, you know, that's why I use the saw. I'm sure I could power through it, but I don't want to, you know, screw up my arm for 5 or 6 months because I powered through it and look macho. So let's get the saw, and we'll make some cuts in these. Before I start the saw, I want to say, when you put your saw on a log like this, it really wants to slide. It really wants to slide. So you got to be very careful when you're doing this. Make sure you got your chaps on, you got a good grip on the saw, and you're not rushing, okay? Safety first. So I hope you guys saw how much that saw wanted to slide around. So really guys, be extremely careful if you're doing that. Now we have a relief cut made, so we can just take our wedge and it's not going to fall out on us. And I just find that it's easier to bang a wedge than it is to just bang on a log 15 times to get it to split. They both work. I just prefer to use as little physical energy as I need to get the most work done with the least amount of energy. And again, if I was doing this, if I wasn't, if you guys weren't looking over my shoulder, I would have used the chainsaw on all 3 logs. Once you get the first cuts done, usually you can go back then and it'll take you like three shots. And I'm not killing myself here. I'm not, there's no ladies watching. I'm just getting the job done. I notice I have better luck once I make a pass across the top. Again, I notice I have better luck if I hit it near the edge. I don't know why that is, but if you're going to beat it in one spot, beat it near the edge. So there you go. So we didn't kill ourselves. We're breathing heavy. It's a good tired. And now we can, we've got manageable chunks that we can lift without killing ourselves. And that, again, that's with the hydraulic splitter. A lot of guys would try to roll this giant log on there, and I mean, moving all these pieces together, that's a heavy weight. I don't know, even when I was in my 20s, that would be a heavy weight. But I don't want to be the marketing guy for Wetterlings, but you got the maul, the splitting maul, the sledgehammer, and the axe for most of the stuff you do in the forest. And I have no regrets, and it doesn't stick, and I have no regrets about this purchase whatsoever. Okay, guys. Well, we're in the home stretch now. I have one log cut into manageable pieces. That's going to translate into about 1.5 to 2 wheelbarrows full of wood, ready to burn. I'm just going to take a drink from my slushie here. And we're just going to split. We're just going to split maybe a couple of these, and then we'll call it a day. The first thing is, if you guys are splitting wood by hand, you need a tire. You don't need any fancy contraptions. You just need to go to the dump, go to a tire store and get an old tire and stick it on top of a log, because the best thing you can do when you're splitting is to not have to bend over every time you try to split a log. The tire will keep the wood contained. If you missed, you'll hit the tire rather than your toe, although you shouldn't be swinging that hard or be that inaccurate. But you guys really want to have a tire. And I made a video about how I mount my tire. If you don't have a big enough round for the bottom, another one of my viewers said, just get some 2x4s or whatever size lumber you need, and screw that to your log, and then screw your tire to that if you need a bigger diameter. The cool thing about the tire on a log is if I need to move it closer to where I'm working, if you want to save a few steps, you can just put it on its side, roll it a little closer, and then stand it back up. You don't need a cart or something to move it around. But then, we're just going to start splitting. And With the big ones like this, I've noticed you have much better luck splitting. If you split wherever the center of the log was, you want to split at a 90-degree angle to the center of the log. That's a big tip. If you're splitting across the pieces, you want to try to split with the grain. You know, you don't want to go across the grain. Those two tricks are going to save you half the energy just by planning where you hit. And, you know, yeah, you do have to split. Now, if there's a big knot in any of your logs, I'm kind of lucky here there's really not in these logs, but if you have a big knot, just try to split around the knot, and then if you, you know, if you have a piece of knotty wood left, you can take your chainsaw, and this is something, this one's up to you. It can be very, the chainsaw can get grabby, you could get very hurt. But what I'll do is I'll take knotty pieces, I'll put them on top of a chopping block, put my dogs and my chainsaw right against the wood, so when I start cutting, the piece of wood's not going to move, and very carefully move it into the log. But again, if you guys aren't comfortable with the chainsaw, if you're new with the chainsaw, I wouldn't do that. I would say just don't do that if you're not 100% sure you're comfortable, you know, cutting knotty pieces. But for me, that's what works. But again, it's definitely dangerous if you're not used to using a chainsaw. It can be dangerous even if you're used to using a chainsaw. Use a chainsaw to cut knotty pieces at your own risk. And I'm perfectly fine if you decide you don't want to do that, and either, you know, give the knotty ones to a friend with an outdoor boiler, or you know, just throw them in the wood. But here we go. So we're going to start with this piece. We're going to take a chunk off the tip here. Then we'll go ahead and do another chunk. And the nice thing again with the tire is you just move around wherever you need to be. This white oak has been splitting beautifully. I don't know if that's because it hasn't been above 0 degrees in a while, or if it's because the wood is like 3 years old. But if anybody ever asks, is it better to split wood when it's seasoned or unseasoned? Wood definitely splits better seasoned. And I know there's an old wives' tale that it splits better when it's frozen, and I'm pretty sure that's true if you're into going out when it's frozen. But if you can get your wood and cut it as soon as possible, there's so much junk on these glasses. If you can get your wood and cut it as soon as possible, just cut into fireplace lengths and just let it sit a year, 2 years, whatever. Whenever you have time to split, just go back and split it. It's better to do that than to leave it in log lengths and cut a little at a time. Like if you're trying to figure out, you know, how to go about your process, if you're in a pinch for getting wood, cut them into log lengths first and then go back and start splitting, as opposed to splitting as you go. This wood is 3 years old, but it's still very wet, and you know, I may need to burn this wood in another couple months, and I hope it's dry enough by then. And again, you know, I'm not going for killer swings here. I'm just trying to get the job done. If you know where to hit the log, you don't often need the haymaker swing. The secret is to know where to hit. And you know, don't forget guys, this is a, what was it, a 33 inch? No, it was 25. It was like a 24, 25 inch log. I mean, this is a big log. It should be fighting me pretty hard. And if there were knots, it absolutely would be. But, you know, this is just enjoyable. And the temperature has warmed up quite a bit. When I started this morning, I think it was like 18 degrees. I split wood for about an hour and a quarter to an hour and a half before I started making the video. And when I got outside, it was, my daughter gets on the bus. My kids got on the bus around 8 o'clock. So as soon as the kids got on the bus, I figured I'd come over here. There's a storm coming tonight. I'm going to lose my ability to split wood. So I got out, and it was there were some flurries coming down. It was about 18 degrees, and it was, you know, dark. And I was having a hard time finding motivation. But like all things in life, once you get started, you find the motivation, right? I keep some old pots here, and I put my bark in one pot, and then I put anything that I can use for kindling in another pot. And I'll shred the bark and use it for mulching my garden, and the log size, the kindling pieces, you know, I'll just put them somewhere covered. Next year I'll have beautiful, nice dry wood that I can use to start a fire. And guys, I gotta say, once you break that big log up into the smaller pieces, it's just a pleasure. It's really fun. And again, it could be the cold weather. It could be that the wood's like 3 years old and it was cut. But I'm enjoying, like, this is enjoyable. This is soothing for me. But let's go show you guys the Holzhausen woodshed thing I got going. And I think we're pretty much all set after that. So guys, this is what it's all about right here. We have all this nice firewood ready to go. And I've already split 2 pieces of white oak, and you can just smell that white oak aroma when you get near the wood pile. For any of you guys who are regular viewers, I mentioned what I'm going to do is, you know, I made a video about this, I think it's called a woodshed hoop house, a long time ago. And it's an awesome way to store wood cheaply, and I don't think it looks horrible if you use a brown tarp. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some 10-foot 2x6s and extend this guy out, you know, like another 10 feet. So I've just been stacking the wood at the end here just so I have it over here and I don't have to move it twice. But all we're going to do is, you know, we just stack our wood, and we're good to go. You know, whether I burn this wood this winter or next winter, we'll be seeing. It's such a cold winter. The reason I'm kind of prioritizing splitting wood is I didn't have as much wood left as I thought. So, you know, up until the end of this Holzhausen is seasoned wood. It's all seasoned wood, but by the end of the Holzhausen, it starts to turn into that oak, which is seasoned but not dry. And I'm hoping to get this stuff to dry sooner than later. But there's something, you know, I don't know if it's you know, seeing the results of your labor, if it's just the joy that, you know, I've had to come a long way to learn how to split wood. And it's pretty much been, you know, I spent a lifetime learning how to split wood and sharpen a chainsaw, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to improve my methods. I don't think you ever actually get to a point where you know everything. But it's just, I think it's an awesome hobby. And I think the secret is to not go at it so hard you injure yourself. Again, there was a point where I was really afraid I screwed up my wrist because I was going too hard splitting stuff. So if you see me going easy today, number one, I'm trying to slow down because I'm on video, and quite often I'll go fast. But number two, I just don't want to injure myself. And I want to show you guys that it's okay to go slow as well. Slow and steady wins the race, not go slow, steady. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you watched this entire video, you're awesome, and I don't know how you did it, but let me know if you did make it through the whole video, because I will give you that little heart thingy that they give you on YouTube. And thanks for watching. And again, you know, all my supporters with my wood splitting videos, I just want to thank you guys for being there through the years and watching me as my sharpening skills and my wood splitting skills have evolved. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay guys, we are in the home stretch now. We got the log cut. We have 1 log's worth of pieces, which is probably going to be about 1.5 to 2 wheelbarrows worth. I spent a lifetime learning how to split wood and sharpen a chainsaw, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to improve my methods. I don't think you ever actually get to a point where you know everything.